Leaders.
Leaders.
Geopolitics.
Geopolitics.
How scary is China?
How scary is China?
America must understand China's weaknesses as well as its strengths.
When Joe Biden meets
America must understand China's weakness as well as its strengths. When Joe Biden meets Xi Jinping in San Francisco next week, the stakes will be high. Fighting in the Middle East threatens to become another theater for great power rivalry, with America backing Israel and China along with Russia, deepening links to Iran. In the South China Sea, China is harassing Philippine ships and flying its planes dangerously close to American ones. Next year will be test and Sino-American relations even more. In January, a candidate despised by Beijing may win Taiwan's presidential election. For most of the year, the race for the White House will be a cacophony. Cacophony will be a cacophony of China bashing. Bash. America's anti-China fervor is partly an overcorrection for its previous complacency about the economic, military, and ideological threat the autocratic giant poses. The danger from China is real, and there are many areas where Mr. Biden's administration should stand up to its communist rulers. But there is also a risk that America's view of China power slides into caricature. Triggering confrontations and, at worst, an avoidable conflict. Even without war, the rush would incur huge economic costs, split America from its allies, and undermine the values that make it strong. Instead, America needs a sober assessment not just of China's strengths, but also of its weaknesses. What are those weaknesses? Among the least understand are its military shortcomings, which we describe in a special report on the People's Liberation Army. After decades of modernization, it is formidable, terrifying. Even with 2 million personnel and an annual budget of $225 billion, it is the world's biggest army and navy and a vast missiles force. By 2030, it could have 1,000 nuclear warheads. Mr. Xi has ordered it to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027, say America's spies, and the PLA projects force more widely too. It intimidates China's neighbors in the South China Sea and skirmishes with India. It has a base in Africa and is seeking one in the Middle East. Yet look more closely and the problems leap out. Drilled for decades on Soviet and then Russian military dogma, the PLA is trying to absorb the lessons from Ukraine and to coordinate joint operations between services. which would be key to any successful invasion of Taiwan. Recruitment is hard, despite efforts of films such as Wolf Warrior to glamorize Jerry. Glamorize Jerry. Dreary.
dreary,
To glamorize Jerry military careers with mediocre pay, the PLA struggles to hire skilled people from fighter pilots to engineers. It has almost no experience of combat. Mr. Xi calls this a peace disease. Its most deadly engagement in the past 4 decades or so was massacring its own citizens around Tiananmen Square in 1989. Although China has made technological leaps from hypersonic missiles to stealth fighters, its military-industrial complex trials behind in areas such as engines for aircraft and ships, and still relies on some foreign parts. American embargoes
Embargoes.
American embargoes on semiconductors and components could make it harder to catch up with the global technological frontier. Despite Mr. Xi's endless purges, corruption appears to be pervasive.
purge,
Despite Mr. Xi's endless purges, corruption appears to be pervasive. It may explain why General Li Shangfu was sacked as China's defense minister this year after only a few months in the job. China's military priorities exist alongside the better-known economic ones. A probably corrupt and Communist Party is growing hostility towards the private sector and foreign capital are impeding growth. China's GDP will increase by 5.4% this year and by only 3.5% in 2028, says IMF. Investment by multinational firms into China investment by multinational firms into China turned negative in the third quarter for the first time since records began in 1998. China's $18 trillion economy is big, but despite its much larger population, its GDP is unlikely to exceed America's by much, for at all by mid-century. Behind China's military and economic weakness lies a third and deeper problem: Mr. Xi's dominance of an authoritarian system that no longer allows serious internal policy debate. Decision making is deteriorating as a result. Economic technocrats have been sidelined by loyalists. By one estimate, PLA troops spend a quarter of their time on political education, poring over such inspiring words as Xi Jinping thought on stringing the military. Mr. Xi's ideology is that the party led by him should command all things always. Personalized rule is bad for China and perilous for the world. Lacking sound advice, Mr. Xi might miscalculate as Vladimir Putin did on Ukraine. However, he may be deterred by the knowledge that if he invades Taiwan but fails to conquer it, he could lose power. One thing is clear, despite periodic and welcome bouts of constructive diplomacy, diplomacy, diplomacy. Diplomacy. Periodic. Despite periodic and welcome bonds of constructive diplomacy, such as recently resumed ministerial contacts with America, Mr. Xi's commitment to undermine liberal values globally will not diminish. diminish. How should America respond? Judiciously trying to cripple China's economy by isolating it could cut global GDP by 7%, reckons the IMF. Closing America's borders to Chinese talent would cut as self-sabotage. Any excessively hawkish policy risks dividing America's network of alliances. Worst of all, too rapid an American military escalation could provoke a disastrous war if Mr. Xi mistakes it for the prelude for American aggression, or worries that unifying Taiwan with the mainland peacefully or by force will only grow harder should he continue to bide his time from complacency to confrontation to calibration.
complacency,
Instead, America needs to calibrate its China policy for the long run. Regarding the economy, that means openness, not isolation. The economy supports limited controls on export of technology with possible military applications, but not the broad embrace of tariffs and industrial policy that began under President Donald Trump and has continued on Mr. Biden. To maintain its economic and technological edge, America should stay open for business, unlike China. Militarily, 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 militarily,
militarily,
militarily, militarily, America should seek deterrence but not domination. The Biden administration has rightly sold more arms to Taiwan, built up forces in Asia, and renewed defense alliance there, but America should avoid a nuclear arms race or being seen to support formal independence of Taiwan. Dealing with China requires a realistic view of its capabilities. The good news is that its weakness and Mr. Xi's mistake give the West time to counter the threat it poses. The Economist. The Economist. The Economist. How scared is China?
collide,
Right. Two young democratic stars collide over Israel and their party's future, representing neighboring districts in the Bronx. Alexander, Alexandra, 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 Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and Richie Torres have staked sharply divergent positions. Divergent positions. Have staked sharply divergent positions on the Israel-Hamas war. They are among the brightest political stars rising from New York. They were born just months apart, 40 years after the founding of Israel, and at the most fraught moment for American-Israeli relations. In decades, the clashing views of Representatives Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Richie Torres offer a striking glimpse into the future of one of American politics' fireside debates. Fiercest.
fiercest,
Fiercest. offer a striking glimpse into the future of one of American politics' fiercest debates. Glimpse 一瞥 Mr. Ocasio-Cortez, the left-wing standard bearer known for her social media mystery, has sparked Democratic orthodox since Hamas' deadly October 7 massacre, using her remarkable reach to build support for a ceasefire and a lasting foreign policy overhaul that put Palestinians on equal footing with Israelis. Ms. Torres, her lesser-known neighbor in the Bronx, is moving to stake his own claim on the national stage as a fervent pro-Israel foil, aggressively taking on what he perceives as crumbling support for the Jewish state on the left. The debate between two millionaire New Yorker millennium The debate between two millennial the debate between two millennial the debate between two millennial New Yorkers has virulent conflicts playing out in social media feeds and raucous street protests. It is a struggle not so much over traditional levers of power in Washington, but over who will shape the minds of a younger, diverse generation of voters that will soon steer the relationship to one of America's closest allies. Raucous field, and it could have a profound impact on the two politicians. And it could have a profound impact on the two politicians' trajectories as wartime passions splinter the left. Mr. Ocasio-Cortez, whose boosters envision her eventually running for the presidency, is laboring to hold together a consequential but delicate coalition that has pushed the Democratic Party leftward on climate policy and economics. Ms. Torres talked about as a future senator or governor appears intent on using the moment to smash the left-wing movement apart. They are two sides of the same coin, young, well-spoken, incredibly smart, said David Greenfield, an influential Jewish Democrat in New York. What you are seeing here is really a question of vision for the future of the Democratic Party. Is it going to be the Richard vision for the AOC version or the AOC version? For now, there is little doubt about the United States' position, though the Biden administration has pushed for humanitarian pauses as Israel's counteroffensive pummels the Gaza Strip. The president and top congressional leaders have repeatedly reaffirmed lockstep support for Israel. Pummel.
Pummel.
Pummel. Pummel. But unlike their parents and grandparents, who watched the country's tenuous
Tenuous.
who watched the country's tenuous birth and propped it up with weapons and money, Americans who came of age in an era of Israeli military might and taxing foreign wars appear to be up for grab politically after months of carnage. Public opinion polls suggest many of them are most sympathetic to the plight of Palestinians and likely to question why the United States is still subsidizing Israel's defense.
Subsidizing.
Subsidizing. Carnage. 도삼.
Carnage.
But unlike the parents and grandparents who watched the country's tenuous birth and propped it up with weapons and money, Americans who came of age in an era of Israeli military might and taxing foreign wars appear to be up for grabs politically after months of carnage. Public opinion polls suggest many of them are more sympathetic to the plight of Palestinians and likely to question why the United States is still subsidizing Israel's defense. Though Mr. Carter struggled early on to articulate her views. Though Mr. Ocasio-Cortez struggled early on to articulate her views on the Middle East and has never visited the region, the 34-year-old Congresswoman has come to embody that generational shift. She used terms like apartheid and oppression, She uses terms like apartheid and oppression, loathed by Israel's defenders. She uses terms like apartheid and oppression loathed by Israel's defenders to describe the treatment of Palestinians. Last week, she called the American Israel Public Affairs Committee the most powerful pro-Israel lobby and one of Ms. Torres' top campaign donors racist and begat racist and bigoted, racist and bigoted. And she has pulled herself into building pressure on Israel to forego its campaign in Gaza, pushing further than 420 other members of the House and virtually every senator. This is presuming a proven and failed strategy, Mr. Ocasio-Cortez said a recent radio interview. So why do it? Why kill kids? Why put people in danger? Why perpetuate these circles when we have done it so many times and it's never kept us safe? Yet 5 years after he burst onto the political stage, even some critics yet 5 years after he burst onto the political stage, even some critics says Mr. Ocasio-Cortez's approach has become more nuanced. More nuanced.
Nuanced.
As she attempts to balance the demands of a leftist movement that holds justice for Palestinians as a key plank and includes large numbers of Jewish voters with varying views on the conflict. Her own safety Democratic district in Queens and the Bronx is largely Latino, Black, and Asian. With only small Jewish and Arab populations. Calls for a ceasefire by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez and others drew a stern rebuke from the White House, and she faced backlash for voting against a bipartisan resolution that expressed strong support for Israel, but she has also taken steps to differentiate herself from allies like Representatives Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and Carol Bush of Missouri, sidestepping some of the left's most inflammatory critiques, like accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza, to focus on the war's mounting human cost. Backlash. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, who did not agree to an interview, met in Washington last month with the families of Jewish hostages kidnapped by Hamas. She has repeatedly condemned the group and supported the two-state solution shunned by some on the left. And at a time when many liberal Jews feel they are being abandoned by the left, she has warned about disgusting and unacceptable anti-Semitism in a She has warned about disgusting and unacceptable. She has warned about disgusting and acceptable. She has warned about disgusting and unacceptable anti-Semitism in a post to 8.4 million Instagram followers, saying no movement of integrity should tolerate it. No movement of integrity should tolerate it. You can see how hard Alexandra is trying to listen compassionately across the lines of this conflict, said Brad Lander, the left-leaning New York City comptroller's New York City controller, who is the highest-ranking Jewish city official. I'm not saying anyone is doing it perfectly, but there is a difference between trying and not trying. More moderate Jewish Democrats have also taken note. Representative Dan Goldman of New York, who along with Mr. Terrace voted this week to censure Ms. Terrace for using divisive pro-Palestinian rhetoric, said he and Mr. Ocasio-Cortez had made a conscious effort to keep an open line of communication, even if they did not always agree on the conflict. On the other side of the Bronx River, Mr. Torres, 35, who is gay and Afro-Latino, has staked out a strikingly different project to the right of many of his peers, offering himself as a convoy to his party's leftward large. His own social media following is relatively small, 170,000 followers on X, the platform formed known as Twitter, to Mr. Ocasio-Cortez 30.2 million, but the combativeness of Mr. Terrace's rhetoric has stood out. In just the last few days, he compared a ceasefire to ask Israel to become the author of its own annihilation. Card claims that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, blood labor. Blood libel, and argued that most Israelis are not actually white, as those who see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a racial struggle claim, but people of color in the American sense. Mr. Torres has reserved special virtue for the Democratic Socialists of America, the small but influential leftist group that has pushed for boycott of Israel and counts Mr. Ocasio-Cortez as a member. In an interview, he said that the DSA was trying to infiltrate the Democratic Party to impose the ideological litmus test on Israel and cleanse those who disagrees with them. He said he was on a publicly state mission to undermine it. I do worry that the next generation is increasingly indoctrinated with anti-Israel hate so virulent that it renders them indifferent to the cold-blooded murder of Jews in Israel, he said. His views are no surprise to those who watched Mr. Torres, a proud college dropout and defender of public housing, evolve from left-aligned political upstart to more traditional Democratic congressman. Though he represents an overwhelmingly black and Latino district that includes only a few thousand Jewish voters, he has improbably made the conflict 5,700 miles away a top priority since 2015, when he traveled to Israel on a city council delegation. It was his first trip abroad, and Mr. Torres said witnessing both the fragility of the frontier and Tel Aviv's openness to gay life left him with profound empathy for Israel and a commitment to a two-state solution. His combativeness, his com- his comba- his combativeness, his combativeness has infuri- infu- infuri- infuriated has infuriated the left. Wali Shahid, a progressive strategist who is close to Mr. Ocasio-Cortez, called Mr. Torres a propagandist for the Israeli government. Jeremy Cohen, a leader of DSA's New York City chapter, said Mr. Torres was unfairly conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. Conflate, mix, is optimistic. Opportunistic. It is opportunistic. It is gross. It is personality offensive to me as a Jew, he said. It remains far from clear how many left-leaning Democrats Mr. Torres is moving. Even some senior colleagues who agreed with him privately worry that this approach may alienate some black, Latin, and other progressive voters at a time when their support is critical. Alienate. And yet his actions have resonated on a visceral level with many American Jews facing one of the most frightening periods since the Holocaust and have brought him a new level of political celebrity. The mere mention of his name inspired an ovation at an NIP AC luncheon in Midtown Manhattan last week. A Jewish nursing professor posted a video of painting she had commissioned with Miss Terrace in front of a Star of David. At a rally in his district, hundreds of Jewish students from SAR Academy, a private Jewish school, chanted his name in unison. One called him a constant in his broken word. As she waited for him to speak at another event near City Hall, Sari Ancona, the mother of the Jewish student at Cooper Union, said Mr. Torres represented something essential. It means that there are people that support us, that aren't us. The conflicting response to Mr. Torres reflects the mood of a city where almost everyone, including New York's largest Jewish population, and the resurgent left, seems to be cautiously probing their neighbors' views on the Middle East. Mr. Ocasio-Cortez and Mr. Torres are no exception. Alicia Selene Singham Goodwin, the political director for Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, a left-wing New York City group, said Mr. Ocasio-Cortez's staff had been in frequent contact to get their gut check on possible public statement. Mr. Torres speaks regularly to moderate and politically conservative Jewish groups. Both lawmakers have conferred with the city's Jewish elected officials. One person neither Mr. Ocasio-Cortez nor Mr. Torres has discussed the war with directly, the other.
Torres.
Torres.